All right, so yesterday we started our unit on body systems, and you would think that we would just dive right into learning about the different systems in the body, but alas, no, we had to start off with something that we were tested on at the beginning of the year. I think it fits like a good puzzle piece when we're doing body systems, but that's okay. So yesterday we looked over unicellular and multicellular organisms, and we took some notes on that, and we took a lot of time taking notes on that, to be honest with you. And when we were talking about unicellular organisms, we said that those are the cells that are made up, or the organisms made up of one cell, hence the name unicellular. Bacteria, we had amoebas, parameciums, euglenas. Those words could show up on a test. It's not going to ask you like anything specifically about them, and it might just use them as an example. Although I think bacteria is probably the one that shows up the most. Again, most microscopic organisms and most unicellular organisms are microscopic, although yesterday we watched in a video, we saw one unicellular organism that's actually about the size of a ruler when we watched the video in class. And we learned a lot about unicellular organisms. I'll go back to that page. Unicellular organisms, they complete everything inside of one cell. They have to do everything. Movement. All the cell, that one cell is dedicated to moving the cell. That one cell is dedicated to taking in food and digesting it. That one cell is dedicated to getting rid of waste when it does take in food and energy. And because they're only made of one cell, they don't have any other cells to help it out to do anything. So it uses a lot of energy, and any type of damage, Braden, is going to cause it to die pretty quickly. Therefore, they have a pretty short lifespan in comparison to multicellular organisms, because there's nothing there to help them out. That one cell is doing all of the work. Again, most of them are microscopic. I don't want you to go around, through life, especially if you got into college. Well, Mr. Bullens told me that every single one. No, not every single one. Most of them are, though. And most microscopic things are. And again, we talked about that. Not everything, but most. They need energy to survive. They have to take in energy some way, somehow. Whether if they are a unicellular producer and they use photosynthesis, or if they are a unicellular organism and they need to consume some type of food, they need to do that. And we know that they have the ability to reproduce. How do we know that? Because there's more of them. They don't just pop up out of nowhere. They have to come from a parent. And again, the offspring, even of unicellular organisms, are going to have very similar look of their parents, because they're going to get genes from their parents. And I think that that's something that was really important. And you'll need to know that today, because you have a project you'll be working on for that. Next, multicellular organisms. And multicellular organisms are something that we've already gone over. We know that because it says multi, they're made up of more than one cell. And the thing that makes them very unique, and this is the fun part we're probably going to start digging into today, is they have specialized cells. Specialized cells. What does that mean? That means every cell has a very specific job, a very special thing that it does. It is not just one cell that has to do everything. We are very fortunate that we have specialized cells that all work together. They all do different jobs, but they all work together to keep us alive. If we take a look at our notes on multicellular organisms, again, they have more than one cell. They're made of many cells. The cells work together. Those cells work together to make sure that the organism stays alive. If we injure a cell, right, it's not as deadly to us as it is to a unicellular organism. Here's the reason why. We have specialized cells. Sometimes we have cells that repair injured cells. That's what they do. That's their job. We also, if we injure a cell, like if we injured like a blood cell or something, it's not the end of the world, because guess what? There's a couple, million, maybe even billion others waiting to replace it, right? Oh, hey, you're dead. All right, no problem. Moving on, right? It's not a huge deal because there's other cells there to replace it. Because of that, multicellular organisms have a longer lifespan. Now, again, Nicola, you see this word showing up over and over and over and over and over, right? You know that that's going to be a huge focus on the test. I guarantee you're going to see that word on an EOG. As a matter of fact, I think I remember seeing that on the first benchmark. I don't know. I don't have a way of going back to look at that, but I'm pretty certain it had something about specialized cells, and then the answer was multicellular organism or something like that. Or which of the following describes a multicellular organism, and specialized cells were in there. And that's something that we need to talk about. So again, cells that have very specific jobs. So that's a very quick 5-minute review of what we went over yesterday. Everybody feel good and confident about that? We should. We've studied it before. This is the second time we've talked about it. One weird thing I told you that as I was looking over some of the tests and the quizzes and released EOGs and things like that, I found a lot of questions, more than I'd ever really noticed, about do these things have anything in common? And I think, Noon, that could be a really tricky question. What do they have in common? You're thinking nothing. One's teeny tiny. The other one's huge. One doesn't live very long. One lives a long time. One has specialized cells. One doesn't. They have nothing in common, but they do have some things in common. They'll try to trick you with that, but the things that they have in common are pretty easy. Unicellular organisms, multicellular organisms need energy to survive. They need food and energy some way, somehow, whether that's through photosynthesis or taking in a food like we do. They have to have it, right? If you take in food, you have to have a way of getting rid of that food. And then we watched 2 funny videos yesterday, one of a paramecium taking a poop, and then a big giant rhino, and that was gross. And we were all like, oh, I don't want lunch now, which is fine. Now, again, looking at genetics, unicellular organisms pass on their DNA to their offspring, and multicellular organisms do the exact same thing. We just finished genetics, and I think we all understand that was pretty easy, right? If we go back, if a euglena has offspring, guess what? It's going to look like a euglena. It's going to have this tail, this flagellum, so it can move around. A paramecium is going to have these little hair-like structures, the cilia, all over the outside of it. Right? The amoeba is going to look like this, the big giant blob, and it's going to move around with the pseudopods as it reaches out and kind of grabs and moves around. Really creepy looking, but it's kind of neat. That's my favorite of the ones, honestly. I like the way that moves around. Right? Because you get your genetics from your parents. Everybody feel good about that? All right, I'm going to pause this. So I do want to talk about this. I don't really think, Dawson, there'll be a whole lot. I don't think they're going to ask you to put this together necessarily. But I do think it's very important to understand because it keeps reinforcing the fact that we are made up of specialized cells. Because we just talked about unicellular versus multicellular. So I think it's important to start off with the word cell. And a cell is the smallest unit inside of our body that can carry on life processes. It's the smallest thing inside of our body that can make life possible. So we're going to start off with cells. And again, we know that we are made up of more than one cell, right? So if you take a bunch of cells that are very similar, so let's just say like heart muscles. If you take a bunch of heart muscles and put them together, you might have something called tissue. And so that's a group of cells. So once you get a bunch of cells that are very similar and you put them together, you have tissue. If you take a bunch of tissue and put it together, you're going to get your organ. So now you've actually got your heart, right? So you've got the cells, like you have heart cells. You can look at individual heart cells. You can look at a group of cells together, which is the heart tissue. You can look at the heart itself. Now if I take the heart, veins, arteries, capillaries, and put all that together, I'm going to have my organ system. I'm going to have my circulatory system, which we will get to very soon. Does that make sense? All right, so I'm just going to jot this down just very quickly on the anchor chart. You'll let you guys copy that down as well, and then we'll come back and continue to take notes. So, Mason, this is more for the people at home than it is in here, because I'm actually going to give you a handout of this. But if you happen to lose yours, I'm not giving you another one, so you need to know where to find it. If you go under here, again, there's a whole bunch of things linked in here this week. But if you look on this Body Systems Guide, you're going to be able to notice that there's a whole bunch of stuff inside of this. Whoa, that's not what I wanted. There we go. Inside of this Body Systems Guide, and it's going to take us on a journey throughout the entire body. It is extremely important, Miguel, that you take notes, not only in your notebook, but inside of this as well, because this booklet that you put together is going to make one of the projects that we do in here so much easier. It's literally going to be like the instruction manual for you to put everything together. And if Nicola's going, I don't know if I did everything, all she's got to do is go straight through this. I literally would start my project and do bones. The next thing I would do would be muscles. The next thing that I would do after that would be the digestive system. Then I would flip the page and I would do the urinary system or the excretory system. I would move on and I would do the respiratory system. And I would just follow this booklet so that I know that I've got everything that's in here on my project, and it would be super easy. If you're lazy and don't take notes, you're going to be in big trouble. If you do a good job, you're going to be fine when it comes to the project. Everybody feel good about that? I'm going to go ahead and pass those out real quick. So let's start finally. Goodness gracious, I don't think we're ever going to get here. Although it does mean that the end of the year is pretty close. Let's start with our first organ system, and that system is the skeletal system. You will notice at the very top of your booklet, it's going to ask you what are the main organs. You literally have one word to write in there. What are the main organs of the skeletal system? It's the bones. Not hard. It's the bones are the main organs. In just a few minutes, it's going to, right beside that's going to ask you for some examples of bones. Here are some examples. Your skull, your ribs, your spine. Fancy word for that is your vertebrae. So if you've been filling out your paper like you're supposed to, you've already got the main organs filled out. You've got the skull, ribs, and spine filled out. Now the bones, and this is the middle part of your paper, have 4 main functions. And I don't think this first one, Victoria, is a very big shock to anybody. Protection. That's the first thing you think about when you think of bones, right? Your skull protects your brain. Your spine protects your spinal cord. Your ribs protects your heart and your lungs. Protection is probably the easiest of the 4 functions. So our first function is protect us. The second one is to give us our shape. Bones give us our shape. What do I mean by that? Who can tell me what this probably is?
A deer.
It's a horse. Close, right? You see the shape of that animal. What do you think this one is?
Snake.
A snake. What about this one? An elephant. So you understand, like if I pull out a human skeleton, you're like, oh, that's a human because it has a very specific shape. Bones give us our shape, and then they partner with the muscles to help us stand upright. So we're going to take that down really quickly. Third, bones allow us to move. They give us the ability to have movement. We have hinges and joints, like your shoulders and your hips have a ball and socket where your hips fit. The way they fit in there is like a ball and socket. That allows you to move. Now, obviously, the bones can't do that by themselves. They need another system to help them do that. That's the muscular system. But bones, with the way you have hinges and joints in your fingers, in your elbows, in your shoulders, in your knees, it allows you to move. So movement is a very important thing for us, right? If we couldn't move, we wouldn't be alive very long. I think the first 3 are pretty easy. Protecting you, giving you your shape, and allowing you to move. And I think most people probably know that. And now that you're thinking about it, going, yeah, I knew that. This last one is one of those very odd things that makes the bones very special that we don't think about very often. Our bones, right now, are making the red blood cells that our circulatory system needs and uses. Our bones are what produce the red blood cells. And we're going to take a look at how that works here in just a few minutes as well. But our bones produce red blood cells. So for those of us that are choosing to not join the Zoom, or you couldn't make it to the Zoom today, that's going to be the end of the notes for you on the skeletal system. You can get onto Nearpod and watch all the other videos associated with that. That'll be important. Make sure you work on your compare and contrast Jamboard assignment where you're working against uni and multicellular. And make sure you're not missing any work and continue to work on your vocabulary. And then when you finish this video, smash the like button and subscribe so I can get to like a whopping 200. That's awesome. Maybe I'll get a prize from YouTube for 200 viewers. Anyway, we'll see you next time.